everybody, to our Veterans Breakfast Club Greatest Generation Live program. I am Todd. This is Tuesday, June 22nd, and we have a little feedback going on. I'll try and take care of that. Here we go. There we go. And I have to say, we have a bit of a change of schedule here. And I know some of you, Whitney Stewart, Charlie Stewart, I could tell by your names, you're here for a program that we had to cancel at the last minute, only because our guest, our special guest, who is Charles Staley, the author, let us know that he could not make it. He was very regretful, can't make it tonight. So we had to reschedule. This was Charles' book, Lost Airmen, the epic rescue of World War II U.S. bomber crews stranded behind enemy lines. Charlie Stewart, I believe Charlie Stewart Sr., Charlie's father, was one of those lost airmen who bailed out from a B-24 over Yugoslavia, was rescued by Tito's partisans. And this was a story that we were going to focus on tonight, but we had to reschedule. We're going to be rescheduling Charles E. Staley Jr., the author, and our other guests associated with this story on July 26th, Tuesday, July 26th. That's what we agreed upon, right, Glenn?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Charles feels badly that we had to postpone this. Part of it too was we actually have a veteran from that book who's still alive, lives in New Orleans. His name is Joe Foto, F-O-T-O, Foto. And he wanted to be on the program, but couldn't be tonight. So Chuck Stanley and I agreed that we would postpone for 1 month. And he was not feeling well after some travel here domestically.
Okay.
So we'll try to put it together again. I've had 2 or 3 conversations with him. We're trying to get Joe Foto to be on a Zoom call with us. We can record it, show it, or perhaps he might be on the program in July. We're not sure yet, but it's a great story. I've read the book. It's a very well-written book, and it truly is an untold story. The story about the rescue of the downed U.S. airmen by the, let me get this right now, by the Chetnik is an often told and well-told story. This
500.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
This is different. This is those who were rescued by the partisans, Tito's men. So it's a fascinating story. So look forward to it for next month.
Because of the kind ministrations of Canada's greatest history teacher, Scott Masters, we were able to get at the 11th hour a replacement. And that is 99-and-a-half-year-old Bill Norberg. Hello, Bill. How are you?
How do you do?
Where are you joining us from, Bill?
From Pineville, North Carolina, a suburb of Charlotte.
Suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. Bill is, again, 99 years old. He's a World War II veteran who served on the USS Enterprise for the entire war. He started serving on the USS Enterprise before Pearl Harbor, and he served on that ship the entire war. He was a yeoman. What specifically, what was your title?
Well, I was just a yeoman.
A yeoman, okay.
I became chief in charge of the captain's office.
Okay, a yeoman in charge of the captain's office, and he's going to be sharing his story with us here tonight after I turn things over to Glenn. But first, I just wanted to let people know that we have this event coming up, this in-person event. If you live here in Western Pennsylvania, we'd love to have you join us. It is a screening of the movie Top Gun. Some of you may have heard of this movie starring Tom Hanks. I have not seen it yet, but I will see it on Saturday, July 2nd with our group at 1 p.m. It's a matinee. It'll be shown here at the Phoenix Theater. Glenn Flickinger,
Yes, sir.
the Phoenix one of those theaters where like the seats shake and the Like there's
no, I don't think it's 4-dimensional. They do have those reclining seats, And they have great popcorn, but it doesn't shake. There's no fourth or fifth dimension to it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's still okay.
Very comfortable.
But it's very comfy. We're going to have a special event there. And what we're trying to do is get 50 people there at least. That's the number. That's the minimum that we need. We're going to get 50 people there. And then we're going to screen the movie, watch the movie, 2 hours and 12 minutes. And then we're going to have essentially a panel discussion with veterans who flew fighter aircraft off of carriers, air crews who worked on carriers, other sailors who worked on carriers. We're going to have them kind of critique and judge the movie, and also Air Force pilots and crew people of all sorts. We're going to have them critique the movie, discuss aspects of the movie, and answer our questions. So please do join us if you'd like to. Would love to have you join us. And I'm actually looking at our who's here on the Zoom call, and I see somebody else who maybe joined us for the Charles Stanley program, and that is Tom Wiley. Hello, Tom. Tom was a B-17 pilot. Hi, Jim. Thank you for getting your dad on with us. I appreciate that. Tom Wiley was a B-17 pilot in World War II. He flew with the 15th Air Force out of Italy. He flew 50 missions. He has quite a story to tell. We did record his story years ago. We've had him join us at various events where he shared a lot of his wisdom and a lot of his experiences with us. I haven't seen him in person in a long while, and I'm very grateful to see you with us tonight, Tom. How are you, Tom?
I'm good.
Good. It's so good to see you. How is Joan?
Joan's fine.
Good. Jim, thank you so much for having your father join us. Your father is quite a hero, and I'm going to, hopefully before the night's over, maybe share a few pictures of him, because we don't get to see him very often. I'm very grateful that he's with us. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Todd.
All right. Hey, and I always have a number of announcements, and I just have a few of them tonight. The magazine, our new magazine is out. I have I gave 1,500 copies to Sean Hall. So that means I think about 3,000 copies in my garage, and I would love to send them out to whoever wants them. I just sent 40 out to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I will send more out to anybody who wants them. These are free of charge. They're 32 pages filled with veteran stories. It's a high production, well-written magazine, and we put this out quarterly because we want people to read the stories that are shared on our programs. And it's also the marketing that we do. I think if people pick up a magazine, read a story, they're going to want to join us either online or in person. So please do. If you did not get one of these in the mail, it's because we don't have your address, or maybe you live outside of the United States. There's a problem getting these outside the US with our postal service. So please let me know if you'd like a copy. I'd be happy to put one in the mail to you. Our sponsors are D&D Auto Salvage. They are a 50-year-old company based here in Western Pennsylvania. They have 2 locations in Tarentum and Lawrenceville. They are an auto salvage and metal recycling operation. They're gigantic, but they also serve just regular individuals who are doing some demolition projects. They serve small companies, contractors, larger companies that have ongoing metal recycling needs or auto salvage needs. Please do contact them if you have any need for auto salvaging or for spare parts for autos. You go to dndautosalvage.com. That's dndautosalvage.com. And we're also grateful, of course, to Tobacco Free Adagio Health. This is a nonprofit that looks to make the world a better place by decreasing smoking and by creating healthier places to live, work, and play. They educate the public about tobacco use. They encourage and help counsel people who are trying to quit, and they also advocate for policies that discourage tobacco use and vaping. You could find more about Tobacco-Free Adagio Health at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Thank you again, all of you, for joining us again, and thank you especially to Bill Norberg for filling in here at the last minute on Greatest Generation Live to share his story as a sailor aboard the USS Enterprise during World War II. And I'm going to turn it over now to Glenn Flickinger, who is the host of Greatest Generation Live. Thank you, Glenn.
Okay, thank you, Todd. It's a pleasure to be back tonight. Thank you all for joining us. And a special thanks once again to Scott Masters for saving our bacon, I guess is maybe the phrase, at least one that we can use on Zoom. And we're really, really pleased to have Bill Nordberg with us. Bill and I had a chance to talk this afternoon for an hour or so. Plus, I've been reading about his experiences online. It's a fascinating story, as Todd said. Bill was on the USS Enterprise for all 4 years plus of World War II. And I can't imagine that there were more than a handful of men, maybe a couple handfuls of men who accomplished that during World War II. So Bill, please say hello and let's get you introduced.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here.
There he is. There he is. Bill, thank you very much again. So we're just going to walk through Bill's story with his life in World War II. Bill's son sent us some great photos, and Todd has those racked up, and occasionally we'll put one up there, Bill, and ask you to tell us about the photo. Okay. So let's just start with the very beginning. Bill, you were born November 13th, 1922. So you've got a big birthday coming up there. Where were you born, Bill?
I was born in Leamington, Wisconsin.
Leamington,
You'll
Wisconsin.
not see that on the map. It's too small.
Okay. And what was your early life like during the Depression and so forth?
Well, it wasn't the happiest. My mom caught tuberculosis when I was maybe about 6 years old, and she had to go to a sanitarium when I was about 7.5. So I know very little bit about being mothered.
So that I'm sorry to hear about.
Yeah, and the Depression came along in 1929,
Right.
and my dad lost his job. He was in Chicago and had 9 children.
Wow.
Yeah, so the household had to break up, and my brother and I were sent to a children's home in Princeton, Illinois, and we stayed there 5 years. The 5 most unhappy years of my life. Regimentation was just about too much for the old boy.
Right.
But 5 years went by, and we got into Chicago, and we boarded a bus for Worcester, Massachusetts. And there was an old farmer friend of my dad who lived in Hubbardston, Massachusetts. That's where my dad had leased a farm for $1 a year plus taxes. The taxes were about $10, $12 a year. So they weren't too great a burden. So we stayed on the farm there for I think about 2 or 3 years. And then he bought a place in the middle of town, paid all of $3,500 for a 7-room house plus 12 acres of land,
Wow.
which I later bought from him and owned for a short time. And
Is that where you went to high school, Bill?
Excuse me?
You went to high school in that town in Massachusetts?
No, they had no high school there. I had to ride 23 miles to Athol, Massachusetts to go to school. And I'd like to say a word about the strange situation. There were 169 in my graduating class. And as of a month and a half ago, 18 of us were still living.
Wow.
I
Wow.
think that's pretty fantastic.
I'm moving to that town as soon as I can. There's got to be something there in the water.
I didn't come from there.
Well,
I
you were
came
there
from-
long enough.
All right. I worked in a woolen mill for a short while, and that was not too good. And I got to remembering that Admiral Richard Byrd had come to my little town in Illinois in either 1933 or 1934 to talk to us about the great adventure of being in Antarctica, and it really piqued my interest. And I've been Navy ever since. So when the time came, February 14th, 1941, I joined the Navy.
So
And
you
was,
joined well before Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
almost 8 or 9 months, 9-10 months before Pearl
10,
Harbor.
10 months before Pearl Harbor, yeah.
Yeah. What was the atmosphere like then for what were you, 18 at the time, I would guess, right?
When I joined the Navy,
Yeah.
well, I'd like to talk about the weather for a minute. We lived in World War I barracks in
Well, no,
Newport, Rhode Island.
what I wanted to
We were-
ask, what I wanted to ask, Bill, when you joined the Navy as a young man, 17 years old, I guess.
18.
18? Did you
Yes.
think there was going to be a war? Were you following like the world events with what was going on in Europe and Japan? Did you think when you joined the Navy, you'd be fighting in a war?
I had no idea we'd be fighting in a war, but I did follow the events in Europe very closely.
Yeah. Okay. So you join the Navy and you go to what's the Navy equivalent of boot camp? What do they call that when you first join the Navy?
Yeah,
Boot camp. Where was that?
Newport, Rhode Island.
And the weather was bad. You were starting to say.
On Narragansett Bay,
Narragansett Bay, famous place.
where the cold winds blow regularly.
Yeah. Should have waited till July to join.
Well, now you tell me. But I did have the opportunity for 2 weeks, if you want to call it an opportunity,
Yeah.
while I was in boot camp to go aboard the USS Constellation,
Oh, yes.
which was my class was operated off of there. The barracks were overloaded, so they put us on the Constellation.
Wow.
The overhead was maybe about 5'8", and most of us were 5'10" or 5'11". So we had a bump or two along the way. We slept in hammocks.
Yeah.
And that was quite an experience.
And how long is boot camp in the Navy at that time? How many months?
7 weeks, if I remember right. It could may have been 9. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyway, in April, we shut down boot camp and loaded ourselves, about 150 of us, in a train. It took 5 days to get across the country to San Diego. And then I was assigned to a communications school. And that was 14 weeks long. Do you have a question?
Pardon? That was
Do
14
you have
weeks.
a question?
Yeah. Well,
14?
tell me the story as to how you got assigned to the USS Enterprise. What happened at the end of that school that got you on the Enterprise?
Well, that's an interesting story.
Oh.
Toward the 13th week of the 14-week class, about 150 of us were sent to an old aircraft hangar. And it had been abandoned by some Lockheed or something. And we were all lined up and told to drop our breeches. So we got what was called a short arm inspection.
Okay.
And this friend of mine from Texas, a great big buzzard, was 2 thousandths of a point ahead of me in the class standings. And so he looked like he was going to be honor man, but they found out he'd been doing something he shouldn't have been doing. He had gonorrhea, and they moved him back for 3 weeks or until cured. So I was able to walk across the stage as the honor man. Now, my sister and aunt were in the audience. I hadn't told them what to expect. And one, I think it was my aunt, almost fainted. And the prize that I won for having been honor man was assignment to the USS Enterprise in the captain's office. They didn't want a dodo in there. They wanted somebody in there who was pretty good. And I was pretty good.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so. Todd, go back to a couple of those pictures of Bill when he was young, maybe with his friends, and maybe Bill can tell us a little bit about the photo and who those friends were. There we go. Can you-
Okay. That was my house in Hubbardston, Massachusetts. I'm on the left, of course.
Okay.
The guy on the right was my closest friend before I went in the Navy. His name was Henry Rivers. He was assigned to the USS Missouri after he joined the Navy. The guy in the middle was Earl Meagher. He was killed in Europe in 1944.
Ouch. Okay. And then the picture, there we go, another one. This is who, Bill?
Well, that's me with the suspenders on, and I have no idea who that other guy is.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't tell you. That was in my hometown of Hubbardston. I know that. All right. That was my initiation into the chief's quarters. I had become a chief petty officer, and everyone sitting at the table had been appointed a chief that particular time, February 1st, 1944.
Okay.
And the ensigns aboard ship were required to serve us. And you can't see it, but we had to eat out of troughs that were looked like hog troughs. And the fork was about 1.5 feet, 2 feet long. And the knife was comparably that way. So we had a hard time eating.
Yeah, yeah. So let's stop there for a minute because we're getting ahead of ourselves. So you're the honor man, and you're assigned to the USS Enterprise. And two questions for you. You told me that you were initially a yeoman striker, which I'd never heard that term before. Explain what a yeoman striker is.
Well, the striker is the Navy term for, I'll have to say, hope to be. So
A yeoman who
striker
wants-
is a yeoman in the eggshell, maybe.
A novice yeoman.
Novice, yeah. I was aboard very short time before I made third class yeoman. And then I was a real yeoman.
And you're assigned to the captain's office.
Yes, sir.
And explain what that means. What were you doing for the captain?
Well, the main duty in the captain's office was to sort out all official mail that came aboard ship. And of course, to create outbound correspondence that the captain originated.
Okay.
And it was quite a job.
So it's sort of an administrative support of the captain. Is that a correct understanding?
That'd be a good description of it. Mhm.
And how many other yeomen worked in that sort of office for the captain?
4 actually worked in there. And then we had the chief that was over us. Then there was a warrant officer over the chief. Of course, they did very little. We did the work.
It's the way it always works in the military.
That's
Right?
reasonable.
Yeah. So you're around the captain and the other senior officers all the time in this duty that you have.
Primarily the captain. Mhm.
Right.
I also had to stand a watch when the war started, I was 4 on and 12 off. And there was a time when I was 4 on and 8 off, and that was pretty tough. And I was stationed up on the Captain's Bridge for my watch. Could I tell you an interesting event that happened?
Sure, please do.
All right. We were involved in the Doolittle raid. Our ship was protecting the Hornet that had the B-25s aboard.
Right.
I was told to deliver a message to the Admiral. So I went up the ladder one deck. He wasn't there, so I left it with his orderly. And I climbed back down the ladder. I didn't hit that steel catwalk like I thought I would. I hit something soft. And just about that time, I heard, "Damn you." And it was in the voice of one Admiral William Bull Halsey. It was in the dark of night up in the North Pacific. It was misty and just nasty. And I said to him, "Yes, sir." And I took off like a shot. And he had no idea who I was. But another interesting thing that happened on that same cruise, I had the midnight to 4 o'clock watch. And I was very, very tired. Do I need to get closer to the microphone?
No, you're okay. Todd,
Okay.
you hearing? Okay, go
I
ahead.
was very tired when the watch started, so I went out on the bridge, the wing of the bridge, the port wing of the bridge, and I leaned my head against the bulkhead. That's the wall, and unfortunately, it was the general quarters. I called everybody ship and man their battle station. And I, somehow or another, I heard was, I don't know who it was, but he was wearing a pea coat. So I went around circuitous route to the bridge, took my pea coat off and hid it for a while and froze to death for the rest of my watch.
Let me ask a question, Bill. So early December 1941, before Pearl Harbor, right? As I recall, the Enterprise, along with perhaps the Yorktown, was delivering planes to Wake Island when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Do I have that right?
Well, the Yorktown wasn't involved. I think it may have been in the Atlantic at that time.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
positive. There were only 3 carriers out there, Saratoga, Lexington, and Enterprise.
Okay.
Anyway, we crossed the equator and lost a day on the way to Wake Island. When we came back, we gained that day, and there were 2 December 5ths. And I don't remember which one of the 2 it was, but we ran into a mini monsoon. And it just bounced us around like corks. And of course, the little destroyers, about 1/5 our size, like bounced around like matchboxes. And they just expended a tremendous amount of fuel trying to keep it in the formation.
Right.
And when the weather cleared up just a little bit, we had the destroyers pull alongside us, and we gave them a good swig of diesel and enough to get back into Pearl Harbor. We had originally been scheduled to be in Pearl Harbor the evening of December 6th, 1941 at 6 p.m. But that monsoon and that refilling the destroyers up delayed us to the point that we couldn't meet that schedule. And boy, I'm telling you, it was consternation aboard ship. No liberty in Pearl Harbor. One feller I knew, his name was Joe Coffey. He was due to get married 8 o'clock that evening. So he stood up his wife there. The next day, we were involved in the war. So she got stood up one day and held up by World War II the next.
So how was it announced? The Enterprise is at sea on its way back to Pearl Harbor. The attack takes place on December 7th in the morning. How was it announced on the Enterprise? When was it announced on the Enterprise the attack had taken place? And what did all of you think about that or feel about that?
At 7:55 that morning, a radio message came in: Pearl Harbor under attack. This is no drill. So we were at war. And it wasn't very long before the executive officer announced, if you look out to the port, you're going to see the rest of the fleet coming to join us. There were 3 cruisers and about 5 destroyers, as I recall. We thought, that's the rest of our fleet. We got some problems. But of course, we had the Saratoga and the Lexington out there. And wasn't long before the Saratoga took a torpedo and had come back to the States. But anyway, we missed being bombed in Pearl Harbor because of that storm.
Right, right.
And if we had been in there, we'd have had twice the losses that the Arizona did.
Right. And you sail into Pearl Harbor, the Enterprise does, on December 8th. Is that right? The day after?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did that look like to you?
Well, it looked like just a shambles. You could feel the feeling of desperation that was in the air. It was terrible. Most of all, I remember the smell. There were fires everywhere, and the fires involved human flesh, paint, diesel fuel, just no limit to the stuff that was burning up. And the smell was absolutely atrocious. I forget now what the smell was, but I remember it for many, many years.
Yeah. And what did Halsey decide to do? How long did you stay at Pearl Harbor?
We got into Pearl Harbor about 8 o'clock on the evening of December 8th. And we immediately started reprovisioning. That was ordinarily a job that took 17 hours in the daytime. And we finished at 7 hours in the middle of the night. Everybody had to turn to, including me.
Right.
So we pulled out of Pearl Harbor before daylight.
Wow.
Because daylight is a good time for submarines to attack. So avoided that.
Yeah.
We went out and looked for the Japanese fleet. Of course, they were gone.
And of course, he was worried about being caught in the harbor if the Japanese fleet had returned.
Absolutely. Why they didn't make a third attack, I'll never know.
Yeah.
They
Big
really
mistake
could have
by the
crippled
Japanese.
us.
Yeah.
They could have crippled us. Yeah.
So after Pearl Harbor, as I recall, the carriers, the Enterprise, the Saratoga, carry out raids on various Japanese islands for a few months after Pearl Harbor. Do you remember much of that?
Well, the Yorktown and Enterprise went out and attacked Gilbert and Marshall Islands. I believe the Japanese had taken them from the Germans right after World War I.
Right.
And they were somewhat fortified, and our people kind of cleaned house on them. However, as we were leaving, a flight of 5 Japanese bombers came after us. Our fighters knocked down two, possibly 3. Either 1 or 2 took off, hightailed it back to where they belonged. But one, who was a group commander, decided he was going to be a hero. So he tried to dive in on the Enterprise And it was across the stern of our ship there. And the captain made a sudden turn to starboard. And that guy crashed into the water, and that was the end of him.
Wow.
But there was a little bit of heroism involved there. One of our guys named Guido had jumped in a SPD that was located at the rear of the ship and turned that 50 caliber machine gun, or 30 caliber, whatever it was, on that plane. And he kept firing away at that thing. And when the plane got right over our flight deck, it sheared off the tail of that plane that Guido was firing from. And then it crashed in the ocean.
Wow.
And Guido was called up before the admiral. And said, the admiral wants to talk with you. And he was shivering like a leaf. Calls and said, what's your name? What's your rank? And he told him, he said, aviation machinist, mate, 3rd class, sir. He said, well, you are a 1st class aviation machinist, mate, now.
That was Halsey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Halsey was the fleet admiral on the Enterprise, but there was a captain who you worked for who was the captain of the Enterprise, right? Yeah.
George Dominic Murray.
Okay.
And by the way, I was in Washington, D.C. about 2-3 weeks ago to celebrate the Battle of Midway. And his great-grandson, Admiral Mustin, was the one that presented me with the official document recognizing me.
Wow. That's quite an honor, Bill. That must have been a great day for you. Yeah. So, Todd, let me pause here for a minute. I don't want to dominate the conversation too much. I see some chat remarks. Are there questions in the chat room or questions from Scott Masters or anyone else at this?
Yes, Scott, you had a question. Why don't you ask it?
Hi, Bill. It's nice to see you. Thanks so much for being here tonight. I was wondering, Bill, if you had friends who were in Pearl Harbor at the time it was attacked.
Well, I've checked into that, and I could only find one person that had been killed. He was assigned to the USS Utah, which capsized, of course. I'm sure there must have been others. I knew others that were in Pearl Harbor that were not wounded. Yeah.
Interesting.
Bill, I will ask you if you can to get a little closer to the microphone, if you can. I just noticed that I do hear you, but I don't know if you know, but when you serve in the military, you tend to get hearing loss. And so some of our folks may be hearing impaired.
As I am.
I'm sure.
And anybody over the age of 60 has got a little bit of that.
Yeah, I've got to say. And it's not, don't knock yourself out over it, but if it's easy for you to get a little closer to the mic, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Todd, any questions in the chat room that should be addressed before we move on?
No, I say go ahead.
Okay.
Full steam ahead.
Okay. So you mentioned the Doolittle raid. And to remind the audience, it's just what happened there. The Hornet, which was a newly commissioned aircraft carrier, was in San Francisco, and it's the aircraft carrier that took on the B-25 bombers, right? And the Hornet and the Enterprise come together in the mid-Pacific somewhere, right? So what were your thoughts when you first saw the Hornet there in April of 1942, and you see these Army bombers on the deck? What in the world? I mean, it must have looked like something out of a movie. What were your thoughts?
Thank goodness, those B-25s doing on that Hornet. There's no way they could take off from there. But they did.
They did. And did you see them take off that morning early morning?
Every one of them.
Wow.
Jimmy Doolittle took off when the bow was rising. So he had a very good takeoff. His assistant was number 2, and the bow was pointing down, and the waves lapped around his wings, but he managed to get up. And of course, we all wish them Godspeed and hope things would go all right for them.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the famous picture. I'm pretty sure that's Doolittle taking off, Todd. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you tell this story about seeing these bombers fly off the deck of the Hornet. What were you and your comrades, your fellow seamen feeling at that time? Were you all cheering? Were you yelling? What was happening?
Let me back up just a little bit. When Admiral Halsey, when the Hornet met us, Admiral Halsey in a short while announced, "We're going to bomb Tokyo." And I could hear shouts from other ships that were close by us. And of course, there was a rousing cheer from the Enterprise too. Everybody was really happy about it.
Yeah. This is, I think we forget today that was really viewed as revenge for Pearl Harbor.
That's correct.
Right.
And it caused the Japanese to rethink a whole lot of their war planning.
Right.
Because they found out they were vulnerable in the homeland.
Right. Yeah, and in fact, one of those fascinating consequences of war, it results in the Japanese Navy attempting to take Midway.
That's correct.
Because Yamamoto, who had wanted to attack Midway, had been stopped from doing that by the senior command. And the senior command so embarrassed by the Doolittle raid that they approved the operation to take Midway.
Right.
Yeah. And when did you first hear about the results of the Doolittle raid, Bill? What did you know about how the raid went at that time during the war?
I might be wrong here, but I believe we heard some radio reports that the planes were over Tokyo and that they were bombing at that time.
Okay.
And some of them were on their way to China, having finished their bombing.
Right. And then of course it comes out later that the raids take place. All of the planes crash land either in the sea or in China, right? And miraculously,
one went to Russia.
That's right, and that crew was interned there for the war. Although towards the end of the war, they make it out. It's a great story in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Todd, what are you showing us there?
I'm showing a British newsreel of the Doolittle raids when it was announced. I thought they'd have some moving picture images, maybe of the planes taking off. Maybe not. There they are. Okay.
It's one of the great stories of World War II, and actually, I think one of the great stories of military history, the Doolittle raid.
Absolutely.
And Jimmy Doolittle, as I've said on this program, there he is. Half a dozen times is maybe one of my most favorite characters, generals, participants in World War II. Goes on to even greater fame later in the war in Europe, commanding the 8th Air Force late in the war.
It might be worth noting a Japanese picket ship spotted us 200 miles further out than our intention was to be spotted.
Right.
So they had the Doolittle and Halsey got together. Abner last Doolittle, can you make it? Something to that effect. Doolittle called all his men together, said we're been exposed. Things are going to be extra dangerous for us. If anybody wants to back out, you're free to do it now. And of course, they voted 100% to go ahead with it. I believe there were 72 of them in that group.
Right. A couple of years ago, we actually did a program on the movie 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, and compared it to the real history. And it's one of the few movies, especially made during the war, that holds up very well relative to the reality of what happened. Right? They stuck very much to the real story. They didn't glorify it too much. They stuck to the real story.
And they didn't have a romance in there.
A little bit, but yeah. Well, let's move on. So as I said before, and as you know very well, Bill, the Doolittle raid results in effect, the Battle of Midway.
Yeah.
Right? The Japanese senior naval command releases Yamamoto to plan the attack on Midway. And the Enterprise is joined by two other carriers at the Battle of Midway, as I recall.
The Yorktown and the Hornet.
And the Hornet, right. And what do you recall about the events leading up to the Battle of Midway? How much did you understand about what was going to happen being near the captain? And Halsey is, well, Halsey, of course, is not there. That's when Halsey is sick, and instead Fletcher, Admiral Fletcher. Spruance. I'm sorry. Thank you. See, you've got a better memory than me, Bill, and I'm embarrassed.
Well, I hope so.
So what do you remember about the events leading up to the battle?
Very, very little. I have to admit, very little.
Okay.
Can we let it go at that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Did you know something was going to happen? Did you have a feeling that there was a battle pending?
Oh, absolutely. And we knew we were going to be outnumbered. And we could just hope and pray that they wouldn't spot us before we spotted them.
Right. And so on June the 4th, the actual day of the battle, the U.S. carriers are located, as I recall, north and a little bit east of the island of Midway.
Correct.
Waiting. There's the famous break of the Japanese naval codes. So we kind of knew they were coming, knew more or less what direction they're coming from, etc. Right. And your battle station, as I recall you telling me, was on the bridge of the Enterprise.
Right.
So you're standing there next to all that senior brass, as they say, watching the events unfold.
True.
And did you see the initial strikes, the initial waves of planes leaving the Enterprise to go search for the Japanese?
We saw a whole bunch of them leave, and quite a few of them didn't come back.
Right.
Yeah, that was really sad.
Sure.
We all knew that the torpedo planes were especially susceptible, so slow as they were.
Yeah.
And some people knew that the torpedoes were defective. I didn't.
Yeah. So what's that feel like to watch these incredibly courageous, brave pilots leaving, and you and the rest of the crew, the other 2,500 men, are just watching?
Well, I'll tell you what, I had my job to do, and I was determined I'd do that the way it needed to be done. I didn't think about what if.
Yeah.
And those guys flying the planes had their job to be done. So they took off and didn't worry about what if so-and-so.
Right. And as the battle unfolded, and you're on the bridge with the captain, were you able to understand what those planes were doing, 150, 200 miles away? Thank you, Todd. By the way, I meant to put some maps up and I never got around to it. But
Yes, we got some intermediate reports about McCluskey locating the fleet, the Japanese fleet. And we got some scattered reports about bombing the Japanese carriers.
when did you know that we had sunk 3 carriers that first day?
I can't
Three Japanese.
remember.
Don't
I
remember.
can't remember.
Okay. Were there Japanese strikes against the Enterprise that first day?
No,
No.
the Yorktown took a beating. That was the only ship.
Yeah. Could you see the Yorktown in the distance taking that
Oh,
beat?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it was a very sad feeling to see our sister ship abandoned, listing, and bound to go down.
Right. And as I recall, I didn't have a chance to refresh my memory. It takes, I think, 2 days for the Yorktown to finally sink, and it's sunk by torpedoes, as I recall.
That's correct. Mhm.
Is that right? Yeah. And the Enterprise is a Yorktown class carrier, so almost twin of the Yorktown.
Right.
Right.
As was the Hornet.
Right. These are before the Essex class carriers start coming out to the Pacific.
Well, they came out in 1944, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
We fought the hard battles before they came out.
You were the front line, no doubt about it. The front line.
Well, and the first line Japanese pilots and ships, as far as that goes, had gone down. So they were fighting the second class ships and air crews.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah. I know we sank 3 of them the first day. I believe the 4th one we sunk on the second day was the Hiru.
They were all sunk on June 4th.
All sunk on June 4th? Okay, but I think we get
the first 3 were sunk of a morning.
right.
And Hiryu went down about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, Todd, I have this great map of the Battle of Midway Island. If I think you've already given me co-host, I can show that
Yes, you can.
if you'd like. Here, let me share my screen and. Okay. Are we seeing that now? No, wait a second. One more button to push.
There we go.
There we go. So let me try to get oriented here. Midway, I think down here, right? Here's the Yorktown damaged, the Enterprise in here somewhere. What was Admiral Spruance on the Enterprise with you, Bill?
Yes.
So he was in the captain's bridge with you?
No, he'd have been up on the Admiral's Bridge, one deck above the Captain's Bridge.
Ah, okay. Did you have any run-ins with Admiral Spruance like you did with Halsey?
Excuse me, say that again?
Did you see Admiral Spruance?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh. And during the battle, what was your battle station, Bill?
While I was on the bridge, I wore a set of headphones, and it put me in connection with the damage control officer way down in the bow of the ship. And I had nothing to do at the Battle of Midway in that regard. because the ship suffered no damage.
Right.
The only time I was worth a plug nickel was when the ship had been damaged and repairs were being made, and I transmitted captain's messages to damage control and vice versa.
Right. Right. And that is what happens at during the naval battles of Guadalcanal.
That's correct.
This is a map of the Solomon Islands, right in the vicinity. And the first battle that takes place is the Battle of the Eastern Solomons.
Right.
And what happened? Was the Enterprise damaged in that battle, Bill?
Well, there's a point that it had to retire to Pearl Harbor and be repaired.
Okay.
We took 3 pretty good bomb hits and suffered many casualties. 2 of my very best friends, for instance, died in that.
Wow. Where were they stationed? Were they near you on the bridge?
No, one of them was on the starboard, aft, 5-inch gun mounts.
Hmm.
And one of them was way down in near the stern of the ship, right at the bottom of the ship. I can't think what the term is now, the keel. And the first bomb was a 550 pounder that went all the way down into the chief's quarters. My friend Paul Miller was stationed. He was a damage control man, and all 23 men of the damage control party were killed immediately.
Wow.
The
Wow.
second bomb struck about maybe 10 feet away from the first bomb, and it was an instantaneous fuse, and it went off in the ammunition locker. And the 2 5-inch guns back there that were being supplied by that ammunition locker were knocked out, and 43, I believe it was, of the gunner there operated in just a second. I walked back there after we had secured the general quarters, and I could see the shoes positioned. Were there. They'd been blown out of their shoes.
Wow. So, Bill, help us understand what that looked like, what that felt like. The Japanese planes are attacking the carrier. You're surrounded by support ships. There's ack fire, machine gun fire going up at these Japanese planes. Some of them get through, some of them don't. Explosions all around you. I can't imagine what I would do. I suppose I'd shrivel up in a ball and cry. I know you didn't.
Maybe you do that, but nobody aboard the ship did that. Every one of us had gone through just ferocious training, causing us to be just so intent on doing the job that was assigned to us. We didn't have time to think about bombs and getting killed and all that. But I'd like to mention to you the second bomb that wiped out the 2 gun crews there. And one of the guys was a fellow that used to stand watch with me on the bridge. His name was Max T. Lee. He was killed instantly. They never found any sign of his body.
Wow.
But I'd 2 days earlier, I was twitting him about his faith. He was a very, very, a Christian, of the Christian faith, and he was very, very attached to it, I might say. I'd tweeted him about that 2 days before, and the minute I got it out of my mouth, I said, "Oh, why'd I do that? I gotta apologize to him, but I never saw him again.
Mm,
So I looked for his family after the war. It took 58 years to find out that he came from Toledo, Illinois. I wrote the weekly paper there and got 3 nice letters from his siblings. And we formed a close friendship there. And I told him our ships association was going to have a reunion in St. Louis, Missouri the following year, 2001. And I wanted to go by there. So I did. And we had a tearful but joyful get together. It was the first time they'd had a firsthand account of their older brother.
wow.
It was
That's-
very touching.
It's again, goosebumps on the back of my neck hearing that story. That's courageous of you to find that family and tell them the story.
I had to do it. Had to do it.
You can understand why. Todd, do we want to pause for any other questions from anybody in the audience or in the chat room?
Yeah, let's open it up to some questions here. Travis, thank you very much for sharing this stirring photo. I shared it on the screen here. I'll share it again. And the reason I'm sharing it again is because of the note I read at the bottom here. The photographer of the person who took the photo, Robert F. Reed, was killed taking the photo.
Wow.
Wow. And we have Connor Ritchie joining us. He just joined us from Louisiana, so he may not be in on the conversation yet. But Connor, I know that you have some information to share about some World War II veterans you talked to recently. And we can, is that right, Connor?
I have one Korean Vietnam veteran that I would like to tell about, and I just entered the Zoom meeting because you have a World War II and fascinating veteran here with us, Bill Norberg. Is that correct?
That is correct. Bill Norberg is with us.
How are you doing, Bill?
How do they do?
Have you talked to Bill, Connor, before?
I would like to. I would like to get his story because the Battle of Midway is a very important battle to remember and not forget.
Bill, Connor Ritchie is, are you 17 now? Connor, or
Yes.
16? You're 17. A 17-year-old student in Lafayette, Louisiana, and he is a World War II enthusiast who loves to have conversations over the phone with World War II veterans and get their stories. Would it be okay if I passed your email on to Connor and so he could contact you and maybe arrange a conversation?
Absolutely. I've had 3 or 4, maybe as much as 5 youngsters that I've been in touch with. Telling
That is so wonderful of you to do, Bill. And it's so wonderful for you to be so interested, Connor, because think about Connor is 17 years old. Bill, you're 99 years old. I'm not that good at math, but that's what, 82 years between you? And
Something like that.
and for the two of you to have a conversation is just delightful for me to think about.
Well, I'd
Yes,
like to
I'm
tell you something in regard to that.
Right.
When
Okay,
excuse me.
No, go ahead,
When I
Bill.
was a
Go ahead, Bill.
freshman- When I was a freshman in high school in 1936, an old gentleman came shuffling across the stage. His name was John Merritt. He was a Civil War veteran.
Oh,
He was 96 years old. And I like to think that perhaps when he was maybe 18 or 20, he had the opportunity to hear a Revolutionary War veteran give a talk. And I've been hoping that maybe some youngster at 17 years old might pass on my story to his youngsters.
Well, thank you for letting me get to your story. It means a lot. But I'll talk about General Gray. Is that okay?
let's if you don't mind, Connor, can we defer that toward the end of the program?
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay. Thank you, Connor.
Well, let's pick up the story because I just noticed the time goes by so fast. It's already a little bit after 8.
Yeah,
So Bill, we get past the Battle of Midway. I'm sorry, the naval battles of Guadalcanal, right, where the Enterprise is damaged. It returns. Does it return to the West Coast to be repaired?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor. And
Yeah.
and do you get some recreation time in Pearl Harbor at that point? How long are you in?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Honolulu and Waikiki.
Bill and I were talking earlier, and we were thinking that he might have seen my mom dancing the hula at some point in Waikiki. Now, we can't prove any of that, but it's possible because she was a professional hula dancer and did a lot of that. So Bill, when does the Enterprise return to action? In 1944 sometime?
Oh, no.
Oh.
You're talking about after the Battle of Santa Cruz
Right.
or Eastern Solomons?
After it's damaged and is repaired in Pearl Harbor, how long does it take?
Until early part of October of 1942. And a battle was forming out in the South Pacific at that time. So we hurried down there, and it wasn't any time at all before the Battle of Santa Cruz developed.
Right.
And we
Another
took
one.
three bombs at that time also. They weren't quite as bad insofar as casualties is concerned, but structurally they caused some real bad problems. And we had to go into New Caledonia for urgent repairs. And we had to leave there with repair people on board, CVs and whatever. They were still making repairs because there was a report that there was a Japanese carrier group on the way down, and we were going to have to intercept them. There were only about 4 Japanese carriers there against us. Thank goodness that battle never developed.
Okay.
So I think we went back into New Caledonia, and were called out again because a fleet of Japanese ships, battleships, cruisers, submarines, destroyers, and 11 transports were coming down the pike. And the planes from Guadalcanal off Henderson Field and the Enterprise planes were able to intercept that and immediately sink 7 of those transports.
Right.
And the other 4 were beached, and thousands of Japanese soldiers were lost. And they never again were able to mount a troop reinforcement group that large, and the people on Guadalcanal just eventually died on the vine.
Right. Like a lot of Japanese and a lot of islands left behind.
Yeah, right. Mhm. And the powers that be didn't care one iota.
Right. The Japanese powers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at one point during the war in late 42, early 43, for a while, am I right in remembering that the Enterprise was the only U.S. carrier active? Because the Yorktown, the Lexington, the Wasp, the Saratoga had all been sunk.
Well, the Saratoga had taken its second torpedo. It never did sink.
Never did sink. It was just withdrawn. for
We
repair.
were the only carrier there for a couple of months. And somebody put a big sign up where the flight deck met the island structure, Enterprise versus the Empire of Japan.
Must have felt like kind of dark days at that time. What was the mood of the seamen?
You named it. There was not a lot of optimism at that time.
Yeah. Now, did you ever feel like, boy, this is never going to end? This war is just going to go on and on and on.
Yes,
And that had to be difficult for you and your shipmates to deal with.
it was. But there was a war to be fought. We joined the Navy to fight the war, so we fought the war.
Right. And when did that negative feeling turn more optimistic? In 1943, in 1944? When did it begin to feel that the US Navy was being replenished and there were plenty more aircraft carriers and battleships and resources coming?
As I recall, it would have been 1943 when the Essex class carriers came online. Excuse me.
Right. And when you first saw an Essex class carrier, I suppose it was the Essex, what did it look like to you compared to the Enterprise and the Yorktown class carriers?
That didn't seem to me there was a whole lot of difference structurally.
Okay.
They didn't have that cantilever deck like other planes did, other carriers did.
Yeah. So not noticeably bigger.
No.
Yeah. Even though I believe they carried sort of 20 or 25 more airplanes because they had more hangar space, they had more deck space than the Yorktown class
I kind
carrier.
of question that figure there. I
Okay.
think they had very, very few more planes than we did.
Okay. Well, we need to get an Essex class veteran on the show, and the two of you need to arm wrestle to see who's going to win that battle.
My best friend at the previous place I lived for 5 years was an Essex fighter pilot.
Oh, wow.
And we never argued one way or another. He always agreed that Enterprise was the big E. And I always agreed with him that they were fighting the third and fourth class Japanese planes.
You guys shot all the first class planes down, right?
That's exactly right.
Did you know any of the fighter pilots? Were you friendly with the fighter pilots
No,
or any of the pilots?
I knew who many of them were, but had no real friendship.
No contact with.
What's his name? The guy that won the Medal of Honor on the Lexington.
Oh, I don't remember. You mean the pilot?
Butch O'Hare.
Yeah.
O'Hare.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Who O'Hare Airport in Chicago is named after. That's right.
Right. Yeah. Mhm. Anyway, I saw him when he took off on his last flight.
Ah,
He looked like he lost his last friend. Actually, he had a bad head cold, as I recall.
ah,
And
wow.
that picture has stuck with me for all these years.
Wow. That was at the Battle of Midway?
No, it
No?
was
Wasn't it? I thought it was.
probably November of 1943.
What?
1943, about November,
Hmm.
when we were training for the first night flights to intercept Japanese.
Interesting. Okay. What was the reputation that these pilots all had in their crews? What did all of you seamen think of these pilots and their crews?
Well, I admired every last one of them.
No.
And it bothered me badly when 16 planes would go out and only 8 had come back.
Yeah. Sure.
They were my shipmates. But it's odd, but we never once held a memorial service for anybody that had been shot down away from the ship.
Huh. That's interesting. See, here's a picture of O'Hare right here.
Yeah.
Butch O'Hare.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How many men on the Yorktown? Or on the Enterprise, I'm sorry. How many men on the
Oh.
Enterprise?
It varied. There were anywhere from 26 to 2,800.
I mean, it always fascinate me to think about 26 or 2,800 men basically there to run a ship to support about 150 men who were the pilots and the crews.
Right. Mhm.
What was life like on that ship just day to day when there wasn't a battle going on? Was it crowded? Was the food good?
Well, I don't recall the chow line when I was before I became a chief. But down in the chief's quarters, we ate royally. We had our own cook. We bought our own steaks and the likes of that. So we could eat steak and eggs whenever we wanted to, while the other guys were eating SOS.
I know SOS, having been brought up in the Army. Yeah, the Marines always had a little problem with that, right, Todd? That the Navy guys are eating steak and eggs, and they're eating C rations and K rations, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's always fun to hear what sailors ate compared to Army or Marine Corps.
Yeah. Well, let's advance a bit here on the timeline, Bill, if you don't mind, just because we're running a little bit short of time.
Yeah.
I know you have many more experiences than we can cover here, but one of my most favorite battles, I've read every book I could find on it, is the Battle of Leyte Gulf in the fall, September, October of 1944, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And it's a very complicated battle. There's 3 Japanese fleets. There's several American fleets. We're trying to land our men on Leyte. The Japanese fleet comes in from the north. And there's the famous incident where Admiral Halsey decides to chase the Japanese carriers north that were sort of dangled as bait, and leaves that one strait of Surigao, I think it is, open. Do you recall very much about what happened when Halsey decided to turn north and chase the Japanese carrier fleet?
Well, I remember there was a lot of consternation of the ship on the ships that he left behind. However, he had orders from Nimitz whenever the possibility came up to knock out those carriers. So that's all I can say. I don't know if he should have gone up there or not, because he left the other ships very vulnerable.
Right. Now you're in that captain's bridge. Is your captain saying anything about what's going on at that time, or is that just not done?
No. The admiral aboard ship tells the captain what to do, and he does it.
Right. There's no second guessing. There's no whispering behind his back.
It better not be.
Okay.
And we better not be whispering behind the captain's back either.
Now, earlier when you and I were talking today, actually when Todd came on, how many captains did you serve on the Enterprise during the war?
No, there were 9 captains.
9 captains. Todd shaking his head. We're still kind of amazed. I think had we been asked to guess, we'd have said 4 or 5, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And which one of these men was your favorite captain, and why?
Cato Douglas Glover. He came on in 1944. He was the kindest and most appreciative of the help aboard ship of any of our captains.
I looked up a list here. Cato, his first name is Cato. kind of an
Right.
interesting first name. Cato Douglas Glover, captain from
Right.
July of 49 to 14 December of 44.
Mhm.
Right. And there's some information that that Todd dug up. Right. Imagine he's he's a Naval Academy graduate. I would think all of them have been Naval Academy graduates.
Oh, absolutely. And I think every one of them had to be a naval aviator also in his past duties.
And all of these men, but one goes on to be an admiral. Do I remember
Yes, sir. Mhm.
that? Yeah, yeah. And which of these other admirals did you maybe have a special liking of? Or sorry, captains. Which of these other captains do you
Captain
remember?
George Murray. Captain
Murray.
George Murray. He was the captain when the war started, and he stayed aboard until 6 months, until almost the Battle of Midway.
Uh-huh. And what was special about him, Bill, that you remember him?
He was just a real gentleman. He treated everybody as equal.
Wow.
However, I'd like to tell you, Admiral Halsey's chief of staff was a brazen guy. And he came down to the captain's bridge one time and started telling folks there what to do. And it wasn't long before Captain Murray got his hackles up, and he climbed that ladder up to Admiral's Bridge and says, "You tell your people to stay off my bridge." And he did.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Conflict that, it's just human beings, right? That have to try to work together under stress. And
Yeah. Mhm. We
some are
haven't said
best.
anything about the kamikazes.
No, I was going to get to that. So the
okay.
Enterprise is obviously at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, where the kamikazes first come out in great number, and then also at
Yeah.
Okinawa. Tell us about your experiences with kamikazes, Bill.
Well, we weren't involved with kamikazes in 1944. I think the surface fleet mostly suffered from them. But at the Battle of Iwo Jima is when they first made their appearance. It was in March of 1945.
Right.
And it wasn't too great a thing to think about them having the one aim in mind, and that's to sink a carrier. One day, I remember there were 700 kamikaze planes that took off intent on sinking every last U.S. carrier. As I remember, they didn't sink, and they didn't even damage one of our carriers that day. But as time went on, the Bunker Hill and the Franklin took some terrible, terrible beatings. In fact, we were taking bets on the bridge there that the Franklin would not survive, but they did. They did. And finally, we took 2 near misses from them in March 2021, something like that, of 45. And then we got the last kamikaze that ever hit an aircraft carrier hit us, May 14th, 1945. And they blew the front elevator 400 feet up in the air. The bomb went down a couple of more decks and wiped out some of the wardroom suites. And it really didn't kill all that many folks there. But that I thought it was interesting that the front elevator, weighing about maybe 13 tons, landed in a pancake fashion about maybe a couple of 100 feet to starboard, about at the 2 o'clock position, and floated and floated. And several of our people that had been blown overboard were able to climb aboard there, including a Marine named Kyle. And Kyle was on the elevator there waiting for rescue, and he heard somebody holler for help. It was a sailor about many yards away. So he took off swimming, and he towed that sailor into the elevator and raised him up there, and he was able to be rescued safely. In the year about 2007 or 8, somewhere around in there, Marine Kyle was finally recognized for his heroism, and he got maybe a Navy Cross. I'm not just sure what it was, but he should have gotten a Distinguished Service Cross.
Bill, again, I just can't imagine being not just a witness to it, but feeling this and seeing this. I mean, when that kamikaze hit and blew that piece off of the ship, the whole ship must have shuddered. Did you think the whole ship was going to go down? What were you feeling at that time?
The ship shuddered, and probably we shuddered along with it. But the ship just kept sailing along in formation.
Wow. Wow. We built some great ships.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Better than the Japanese.
Yeah. Now, were you still, when that kamikaze attack took place, were you still the communications officer for damage control?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So what are you hearing in your headphones? What are they saying to you in terms of the damage done to the ship?
All right. If compartment number 604 was suffering from bomb damage and there were fires down there, the captain might say, how's the wardroom coming out? Are the repairs under control? Of course, there might be occasions when they were under control and occasions when they weren't. I think the most harrowing part we ever had was on August 24th of 42, when a 12 square foot hole was blown down around the keel of the ship, and thousands of tons of water actually seeped into the ship. It got into numerous compartments, and it got down into the engine room spaces. And it soaked one of the rudder controls to the point that it stuck at 20 degrees to starboard. And we were going around in circles. And there was a report of 30 or 36 Japanese planes on the way. That was kind of exciting. Two great heroes put on some rescue breathing apparatus and went down into that 180-degree heat and stayed there until they got that rudder under control. And the ship was kind of got back on in even keel. But we managed to crawl into a storm, a South Pacific shower, you might call it. But there were no radios aboard the Japanese planes, so they couldn't tell where we were. And they flew about 50 miles off course, and we were saved.
Unbelievable, Bill. These experience after experience and that you went through. Let's fast forward to the very end because we're running out of time, Bill. Have run out of time. You make it through the Battle of Okinawa. Where were you on August the 6th, 1945? And how did you hear about the atomic bomb? What did you think of it at that time?
Well, we thought, thank goodness, the war was going to end. I really thought that, because that was a devastating blow to the Japanese. But then when they didn't give up, I didn't know what to do. And then a little boy came along August the 9th. And that settled the thing.
And
I was up in, go ahead.
where was the Enterprise and where were you at that time?
We were in dry dock up in Bremerton, Washington.
Ah, okay.
And I was transferred off the ship on August the 9th. The day little baby or whatever was hit Nagasaki. And I went to shore duty and had about 7 or 8 different stations there in a year and a half. And then I went home.
What'd that feel like going home?
I felt mighty good for a couple of reasons. I wasn't going to be shifted around from pillar to post anymore. And I found a job that I liked. And I was running a poultry business on the side, so I was making pretty good money. And then the bottom fell out. So I moved to North Carolina and met the love of my life.
Great, great. And you had 2 sons, as I recall?
2 sons and a daughter.
2 sons and a daughter.
And they're all excellent kids. My wife died 8 years ago this month.
I'm sorry to hear that, Bill.
We had 64 good years together.
And how many grandchildren, Bill?
11 grandchildren and 28 great-grandchildren. I won a prize near my compound for the most great-grandchildren.
Well, you certainly
Nothing I
deserve.
didn't do it. And what?
You certainly deserve a lot of prizes and a lot of awards, Bill, for all of your life, not just the World War II portion of it that we've mostly talked about tonight. So,
And Bill, we have several people who want to have a few things to say to you. Bob Book.
Excuse me, say again.
Bill, we have several people on tonight who want to just say a few things to you. I think they very much appreciate you sharing the story. And Bob Book, you may be away from I don't see your face. I don't see your beautiful face on Zoom here. So you may have stepped away, but Bob Book put in the chat, Bill, to me, you are as integral to the big. Oh, there you are. But Bob Book put in the chat, Bill, to me, you are as integral to the big. There you are. But Bob Book put in the chat.
There I am.
Okay.
Oh, there you
Bob, do you want to share what you wrote here in the chat? Bob, do you want to share what you wrote here in the chat?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to step away from the camera. Jane's with me too, by the way, and we both feel the same way.
Hi, Jane.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to step away from the camera. Jane's with me too, by the way, and we both feel the same way.
Hi, Todd.
We're getting a
Bill,
lot of
Bill, I
feedback,
just want
Bob.
to say to you, this is what I wrote. To me, you are as integral to the victories as every one of those admirals, captains, and officers that you served with. You did not serve under them. You did not serve under them, sir. You served with them. And may God bless you, sir, and thank you so much. I just cannot believe the stories that you told us this evening. And again, from my bottom of my heart and my wife's heart, we want to thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. I appreciate that.
Todd, someone else?
Ken Kazak, you had a question and a comment, and so did you, Rick Arisman. I just want to invite you to say it out loud here.
Todd, may I go?
Yes.
Bill, thank you so much. This was amazing, but I'm just curious, your articulation is amazing, but have you always been telling your story? Like in 1952, did somebody invite you to the VFW and you told your story? Have you been doing this all along?
Well, I really started going to schools and lodges and one thing and another to tell my story. I think it was about in the 1980s. And then in the 1990s, it was just a full calendar. And then for about 25 years, there was little or nothing. And now business has picked up.
I'm sorry.
I had two interviews last week, and I think I've got two. Yes, I know I've got two this week. So I enjoy letting people know what happened back in World War II. I think it's part of history, and they deserve to know it. And I appreciate so much history scholars, junior high, high school, and college students that are interested in our past. I have a granddaughter in junior high now, and she is a nut about history. So we have many good conversations together. I spoke to her junior high class, plus two other junior high classes on a Zoom call recently, and they seem to appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Rick Arisman is amazed at your recall and the detail that you were able to provide. Travis Buggy was very inspired also by your story, and he's been adding helpful information here in the chat on the Zoom side. Before we go to Connor, and I do want Connor briefly, if he wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of information about the veteran that he's talked to lately. There are some other photos that you shared with us, Bill. Who is this lovely young lady here on your arm, or is that not you?
That's me, and that's my sister, Lucille, who lived out in San Diego, California.
Oh, how great.
That picture was taken at some beach nearby. I can't think of the name of it right now. She was a lovely lady, but sadly she got tuberculosis and died at a very young age.
Just like your mother.
No, that's my sister.
I know, but didn't your mother die of tuberculosis? Didn't
Oh,
you say that?
yes.
Right. Look at that. You look so young.
Get that off the screen.
What's going on here?
Oh, this is the cheese square picture where you had just become chiefs, and we had to eat with those long forks and knives as our initiation.
Yeah, that's your initiation. You mentioned that. Okay. I have never seen that before.
Can you see? I'm pointing to a kind of a bald-headed guy right there. His name was H.A. Red Boucher. He went on to become lieutenant governor of the state of Arkansas. And one of the things he's best noted for is that he started the Midnight Sun Baseball Classic, where all the teams from various cities in Alaska would play while the midnight sun was shining.
Wow. Wow.
Excuse me. I remembered a few of those other guys there. Yeah, that's me up there. I'd like to tell you a story about that. She was my lady friend. Her name was Grace, and she worked for me. And in, I think it was September of 1946, excuse me, I took a leave to go home to Massachusetts. And she took up with another guy, a first-class boatswain's mate or something, and left me in the lurch. She thought I'd gone up there to make contact with my girlfriend up there, which I did. And I broke off with her, planning to have a future with Grace. But it didn't turn out that way. She married a first-class something or another and moved out to Colorado. And unless I'm badly mistaken, he became lieutenant governor of Colorado. And she was a second lady or whatever you want to call her. I never did hear from her again.
Great stories, Bill. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Bill, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your life. Thank you for being one of our heroes. There just aren't enough words to describe what a positive, great, courageous life you've led. And thank you very much for sharing just a little bit of it with us tonight.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it very much.
Connor Ritchie, I'm sorry to squeeze you in here in the last minute of our program, but I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about a veteran that you talked with, Al Gray. Could you tell us a little bit about him, a Marine general?
Yes, he was one of the greatest Marine generals of all time in the history. I'll tell you a little story about his service, and then I'll go to his commanding officers afterwards because they were famous in their time. First, he joined the Marines in 1950. He came from a military family, and he served in the infantry in the Korean War. And that's where he met Chesty Puller, who had won 5 Navy Crosses and had been awarded several Purple Hearts, most famous Marine of all time. He also met General Shepard and General Shroop, Colonel Shroop, but later General Shroop, later Commandant Shroop, who had worked for him in the 1960s, and other Marine legends who were legendary in their time. And they fought in battles in the Pacific like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Tarawa. That's where Shroop had won the Medal of Honor. And he had commanded several different commands in Vietnam as well. He was a regimental communications officer at one time. And then throughout his career, he participated at the Saigon evacuation called the Operation Frequent Wind. And General Wilson had promoted him to Brigadier General afterwards. And then he later became Commanding General of FMF, which is Fleet Marine Force Pacific. And then he became our Commandant of the Marine Corps after he replaced General P.X. Kelly, who was one of his longtime mentors. Anyway, I'll show you a photo of one of his commanding officers. And I'm just curious, do you recognize this photo? That's him. That's him on this side.
I can't see the photo. Oh, okay.
This was one of the Marine legends that he personally knew. He knew all the commandants of the Marine Corps since he enlisted until he retired. So that's, you know who this is?
Let's see here.
That's General Krulak.
Okay.
That's General Krulak, General Brute Krulak, who had got the nickname Brute from the Naval Academy, whose son who was Commandant of the Marine Corps later on. And here's another photo of one of his other commanding officers, another famous Marine. That's General Cushman.
Okay.
Bob Cushman, who had served with his one of his assistants in Vietnam in his early Vietnam tours. And Cushman had been a Navy Cross winner from World War II at the Battle of Guam, where Lew Wilson had won the Medal of Honor. And General Anderson, who I showed you the email, was his assistant. I mean, they got along fine, but he was not liked by the other generals. That's why he didn't get the promotion. That's why General Wilson had got the promotion to Commandant instead of Anderson. But Cushman was a very smart general because he later became a distinguished officer after he commanded the 2nd Marines, and he became the CIA commanding officer. But the ones he admired a lot of Marines, a lot of famous old timers Marines at that time. But the ones that he admired the most was General Wilson, Medal of Honor from Guam, General Barrow, Bob Barrow, who was one of Wilson's assistant commandants, who had been a China Marine in World War II, who was Navy Cross veteran from the Chosin Reservoir, and Ray Davis, who was double awarded Navy Cross winner from Peleliu and Medal of Honor from Chosin, and also General Miller. So there was many other generals like General Krulak, for example, or Chesty Pull, or he knew all these guys.
And there's a multi-volume biography of Al Gray. You could see on Amazon. I just shared with you images of it. What a fascinating person for you to talk with, Connor. He's 93 years old today or now. And so his career really did straddle this long, expansive time where he met Marines and served with Marines from the earlier years and also from the later years. Silver Star recipient for his command in Vietnam also.
Who turned out to be very famous in World War II. Can you imagine having to personally know all these famous Marines like Cushman and Shoup and Chesty Puller, Shepard? There's many other. Lou Walt, for example, who was a Marine Raider at the time. Can you imagine knowing all these multitude generals?
Yeah.
Who turned out to be famous?
A lot of brass on those shoulders. Thank you very much, Connor, for sharing that information with us. Thank you again, Bill Norberg, and thanks to all of you for hanging with us. I know we went over tonight, but thank you for joining us. I hope to see you Monday night. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Thank you all.